It's Thursday night, 8 p.m. You know what that means. It's your Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast live and on the air. We got lots to get into this week. A packed weekend of wrestling last weekend between AEW, WWE, and even NXT. We're going to have to say what we were into, what got our attention, and who won the weekend in the end, in addition to a whole bunch of other stuff, because people lost belts, people's streaks ended, and someone is definitely back and maybe has a split reaction to how people are receiving the news of his return. All that night, more tonight on your Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast. We'll be back in 1 sec.
Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt. All I really want, that Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really need, that Big Gold Belt, 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 Big Gold Belt. All I really want, that Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt, Big Gold Belt.
How is it going, everybody? Thursday night with your Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast. We got most of the crew here this week, and we are glad to have you here with us. It's me, Will, with Silly Celis up at the top of the screen across from me, Giant Crab down below, and Damien in the Lone Star State. Gentlemen, how is it going on another fine Thursday night with all y'all?
Good.
It's going good. Lots to discuss.
Definitely lots to discuss. A packed weekend last weekend of wrestling, and we're going to get to that in 1 second because we're going to quickly touch on old Two Chains wanted to make sure that we touched on it being premiere week for Dark Side of the Ring. He had a great preview this week of the premiere episode that dropped Tuesday night on Vice, and also an interview recently with the creators of the show. So they're really getting the word out about the new season starting. And this week things kicked off with Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch and their sordid story of rise and fall in the wrestling business. And Damien, I know you checked it out. I also did. It just premiered 2 days ago, so a lot of folks haven't got to it yet. But to quickly kind of touch on the premiere episode, Lord knows Dark Side of the Ring gets crazy a lot of times with a gritty, nasty, dirty underbelly of wrestling tales.
Well put.
And I got kind of all that in this week's story with Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch. Personally, I think a lot of people were expecting that. Going into it, I was way more excited to see the rise of Chris Candido in the 90s when he was like NWA champ for a bit, the ECW run, all that kind of good stuff. Like the early days in Smoky Mountain, all that good stuff when they were young and just got a break in the business very quickly, to say the least. I mean, like they got into how Tammy got picked up like in Smoky Mountain with Chris, like pretty much like right out of high school. It's kind of wild how quickly they were able to get their foot in the door, especially back then when things were a lot harder to get into, but they managed to do it one way or another. And I don't know, the second half is kind of what it is with, I think most people that are watching the show are probably familiar with the state of Tammy Sitch and her in and out of jail last few years, despite being a WWE Hall of Famer, and her sordid incidents with the law. But it was a tough watch. I think that's the main takeaway from it from a lot of people, is like a tough watch, but the front end of it at least had like, a feel good wrestling story to it before just, the business just kind of, the 90s were a rough time. I don't know, Damien, get in here. What were your quick thoughts on it?
You're not kidding about the 90s being a wild time. I put this out on Twitter yesterday, and I won't spoil it, but I said, just finished watching it. Wow. ... I mean, wow. Sad. So we hear all the stories about how sad the second half, like you said, Will, was with both, Tammy as well as Chris. But I didn't know it was like that. I didn't understand. Maybe because I was younger when they debuted. When the Body Downers came out in '96, I still believed as a fan. So knowing what Chris went through, knowing that he did have natural talent, and then we talk about the midpoint and the ending, and I can sum it up real quick for Chris's side. Love makes you do stupid things. Really, really stupid things. And on the other side for Tammy, you get a little bit of success and you let it run wild, it will ruin you.
Yes.
And that is basically how I'll sum up my viewing points, and I'll let everybody watch it and then we can talk about it again, in detail. But just sad. Such promise ending the way it did for both parties was, we always talk about unfulfilled potential. That was Chris Candido. And
33 when he passed.
Yeah.
Not
and
old
finding his
all.
way, he found his way in TNA of all places at the end of it all. So it's a shame. I loved him in ECW when he was part of the Triple Threat. I loved him in ECW, but that's how it ended.
Yeah. A tough watch, but also a good watch. I mean, kind of par for the course for Dark Side of the Ring. But season premiere this week. Next week, they're doing Magnum TA's Car Wreck, which, God, for 80s wrestling is a huge story, and another story of potential and how stuff can get taken away in the blink of an eye. So, we'll probably be talking about that one next week, too. But
also, real quick, real fast. I know Cornette gets a lot of flack online. But if you watch this episode and you listen to Jim Cornette talk about both of them, from when he met them, when he worked with them, when he got them the break in WWE, there is a feeling of betrayal that he's echoing in his voice when it comes to Tammy. And when he talks about Chris, there is so much reverence. And, Jim hates talking about current day wrestling, but he loved Chris Candido's work rate and Chris the person. And you can tell how heartbroken he was when describing it. So if you want to see a humanistic side of Jim Cornette that the internet doesn't really see, this is a great episode to see that in.
Yeah, no character BS, no gimmicks being worked there. So, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Wild stuff. We will probably be talking more about the season as it goes on. There are about 10 episodes to come.
Of course.
So let's switch gears and get to this past weekend, because it was a packed weekend that we talked about on last week's show. So we had 3 major shows, in addition, tons of other stuff happening in the world. But the 3 major shows of the weekend: WWE Night of Champions, Double or Nothing from AEW on Sunday, and that was also going up against NXT Battleground. And there ain't no way to touch on all this stuff because there was a lot going on. So let's get big picture. I'm gonna get the ball out of my hands right away. Silly Celis, my man, across from the top of the screen to me.
Yes.
Takeaways from, I guess, what of the weekend that you saw? What made the biggest impression on you? And then overall, I guess the other big question we're going to get to as we go through this, guys, is who won the weekend? Because we had 3 different shows here, and they were very different shows. So I'll throw to you first. Biggest, hottest stuff, I guess, biggest things that you were like, oh my God, in the wrestling weekend.
So I'm going to give 2 people as a tie here. And one is a huge, ally of our show. And one is this continued person that we talk about over the year. The way that they're continuing this, I'm going to call it 3-year story now. And I'm taking it back from COVID year and just the rebuild of what Roman Reigns is today and how it started in COVID when he aligned himself from Paul Heyman when he returned. And if you could have told me 3 years from that first image where you saw Paul Heyman on the couch with Roman Reigns of where he is today, I never thought it would be like this. And this is the greatness of long-term storytelling that's going on in wrestling. And I even had a conversation with my wife yesterday, who works in the industry, in the entertainment industry. And of course, as we all know, it's a writer strike going on. And I literally said this to her today. I said, are WWE writers under the guild? Which I knew they probably weren't. But when you think about the storyline writing that's going along with this story of Roman Reigns, somebody needs to hire somebody at WWE for what they're trying to script for him, from his facial reactions in the ring to the action that's going into the ring and the story that's being told in the ring. I think that's a huge thing. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it to Donovan Dijak. Dijak had a great performance on NXT this past weekend, and that match was brutal. But to me, that was probably one of the greatest matches to rebuild his character, as he came up to WWE on the main roster, didn't work out with the character. Let's bring him back to bring up what he really is, turn it up a notch, and let's see what he can do. And what he did in the ring, even though he lost, I think it was great for him. It was great for his opponent to try to build him back up to be one of those top muscle heels in WWE that they've been missing for a long time. So I got to give it to those two as a tie. Those are my two favorite things. But just to give it to Saudi Arabia, in my opinion, that felt like a pay-per-view or a premium event for the first time instead of a premium house show. I got to give it to the Saudi Arabia just for hosting a fantastic event for Night of Champions.
There you go. We have yet to hear from the Giant Crab Jamal tonight yet so far, so let's get him in here next. Thoughts on the weekend of wrestling last week?
Well, the biggest question, of course, over the weekend was who would shine, who would stand atop the weekend, because there was so much going on in such a short period of time. And I think, as I suspected, Dragunov versus Dijak did not disappoint. It was interesting to see Jade finally lose, her belt, which was, I don't like the way they did that, because it kind of, she's 60-0. So what? And then, that was kind of quickly disposed of, and then now we moved on to a new champion. It would have been interesting to start that build to maybe a special episode of Dynamite in a month, or hell, even Forbidden Door. I mean, it would have been cooler. I mean, granted, yes, Statlander's back, and if you're a fan of hers, cool. But it would have been interesting to see maybe somebody from Stardom come over and challenge for the New Japan belt, build that up for the rest of the month, and then have Statlander debut at Forbidden Door. But they did what they did, and that was the thing. And then, of course, the situation in Saudi Arabia. Trish Stratus still got it, which was not as surprising as I thought it would be. But just like riding a bike, and Roman Reigns, love him or hate him, and personally, I don't know what else they go where else they go with this story. And everything, it's like the Fast and the Furious movie. Just when you think it should end, and it should have ended 5 years ago.
Yep.
There's another wrinkle. There's another thing that keeps you interested, and you go, okay, all right, you got me for another year. Let's see how this goes. So I don't know what they do, but that's also what we talked about last week too, where it's just like, well, now that we're starting to see the wrinkles, now that we're starting to see some of the cracks form in the armor, is who steps in, whose moment gets created when you have something like this happen. And I thought that it was, overall, it was just a good weekend for, just wrestling on TV. And I'm sure the indies absolutely did their thing, and I hope that you guys went to a show last weekend. But just in general, you really couldn't have gone wrong. The NXT show was a very good NXT show. Mm-hmm. The pay-per-view out there in Saudi Arabia was a show that you should have watched but didn't need to, but you're glad you did if you watched it. And then, of course, Double or Nothing was fine. Arguably the weaker of the three, if you had to stack them in order. But there were definitely some highlights from them. But then again, that's what we suspected going in, as we all call Double or Nothing the lame duck pay-per-view, as people are looking more forward to Collision, more forward to Forbidden Door, more forward to the rest of the summer. So everything surprisingly lived up to expectations, which is fine, which was absolutely fine. I didn't expect much from Double or Nothing. I didn't get it. The NXT show was expectantly good, which is fine, and the Saudi pay-per-view was a decent Saudi pay-per-view. So more of this, please. Not mad at it.
Yeah, it's hard to complain when at least things are delivering. At least things are clicking in some way or not. Damien, get in here. Thoughts on the Battleground Double or Nothing Night of Champions weekend?
So I'll go a little bit the other way when it comes to the surprise. For me, it was Tiffany Stratton finally winning the women's championship, and y'all know in the chat I'm not a big Tiffany Stratton fan. I think it was too early for her to win a title, but then again, when you look at the division, you didn't want to give it back to Roxanne. Cora Jade is a heel in and of itself. She doesn't really need the belt, and Gigi and JC fought in a cage. So at NXT. So I'm not a fan. I'm sorry. She's athletic. She's great. Just doesn't do it for me. I'm not going to bash the girl. She comes from a bodybuilding and gymnastics background. Kudos to her. But what didn't surprise me was two things. And we'll talk about one of them later in more in depth. But one of us on this panel said Asuka should win the title against Bianca. One of us said that and said that overseas was the best time to do it. And I was proven right. And that's why in the group chat, I literally said bingo that made it happen because I called it. But also how bored I was with Double or Nothing. I was legitimately bored watching it to the point where I walked away. I know Jamal talked about it last week. Like, I'll go here, watch baseball. I'll go walk away and make dinner or do something. That's what I did. I walked away and started making dinner and meal prepping for the week because I was just not captivated at all. I think when I finally came back on when Wardlow tried to springboard onto the ladder and realizing that's a big boy and he shouldn't be doing things like that and knocked over the ladder. And I'm like, okay, great. And then seeing how the Saraya, Tony Storm, Jamie Haterall thing played out, she's legit injured, get better. The thing I couldn't stand was the main event. I said, oh my God, these camera angles. Who's doing this? Kevin Dunn? Like the amount of times they missed action just to go do something that was more electrifying, pun intended, with like sparklers in your shoes. But overall, that pay-per-view just bored me. The main event took too damn long. What the hell did you bring in Taya Valkyrie for if this was going to be the payoff?
What time did that start?
The pay-per-view?
8 o'clock.
No, the main event.
Ooh.
I think it started with 45 minutes left in the pay-per-view.
So we're talking. It started at about 9:45 Central Time, something like that.
Something like that.
That is late.
And it went 27 minutes.
Wow.
And
Okay.
And there were a lot of moments during that main event. I'm like, it's too much. You put too much out there, but not enough cameramen or camera women to actually film this stuff. And of course, we knew Moxley was going to bleed. Of course, the Bucks were going to do something weird. And then Blackpool Combat Club won, and I'm just like, and?
What I hate about the AEW hardcore matches is that they're like PG-13 cuts of an R-rated movie.
Thank you.
When you really like, and again, if you don't have the stomach for deathmatch wrestling or anything like that, then cool. Watch AEW, and that can be your ceiling. As a person that watches and enjoys the spectacle that is deathmatch wrestling, it that's what it feels like. It feels like a PG-13 cut of an R-rated movie where you really want them to go not necessarily completely far over the line. This isn't 1995. New Jack is dead. I get it. But it's just like, this isn't it. This isn't what you're saying that it is. This is like a Beyond Burger. You're trying to convince me that it's something that it really isn't. And if it's not that, then sell it as something else. But don't tell me that this is anarchy and this is hardcore. This is lights out, which they had a lights out match, but they didn't call it lights out. So sure. But either way, it's an odd thing. And it always leaves a taste in my bad taste in my mouth. Like, this is not real. This is like goat's milk. Like, this is not what you think it is, even though they're selling it or something else. And it's just the damnedest thing. But yeah, there's no way I was staying up till 11:30 to watch the end of the pay-per-view. And to be honest with you, that's when I tapped out because the match before that was the 4-way Pillars match, and I don't care about
Right.
that.
Right.
And then I can't sit through a Moxley match, so it ended well for me. Because, that I got a smooth hour back and went straight to bed. But
Yeah, I saw the early part of Double or Nothing. I think I
Right.
came in for the Jeff Jarrett match, since that's what I was most interested in. I saw the Jarrett match, and then I watched what was after that. After that was the Wardlow match. It wasn't that one. There was something else I took a good look at on there. Oh, the Jade and her match.
that was fine.
Jade and that whole segment. And we'll talk about that separately because there was like, we want to compare and contrast some stuff involving the women this weekend. So we'll do a separate segment on that. Yeah. So those were the two big parts I watched. And then once they got to the Pillars match, I was like, I didn't have any interest in that match to begin with. So I sat that out and I was like, by that point, I was starting to get tired. And I came back. I was like, you know what? Let me see the beginning of this spectacle they're going to do at the end. And I think I made it through 2 goes around of a Wild Thing by that damn band.
Oh my God. I almost forgot about that.
And after hearing it twice, I was like, I think I'm good. And I was like, time to get some sleep. It's been a long weekend and I can still have another day off on Monday. And that's where I tapped out, was after about 2 renditions of Wild Thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm good there. Now going all the way back to Celis, I mean, obviously on the Saudi show, the advancement in the bloodline story is the biggest thing coming out of that, where it's my God, the Usos finally made a move. So that was huge. And we're still sitting here in the aftermath of that. Nothing will happen until SmackDown tomorrow night to see how they follow up on that. But that Jimmy threw the gauntlet down and then put an exclamation point on it. We're like, no, we're really doing this. I'm doing what you should have done ages ago. So that was coming out of that show. It was just like, oh my God, they're turning the next page in the bloodline story. And it feels like it's the right time because Lord knows since Mania, it's been kind of stagnant. We've been waiting for that next shoe to drop. Now the next shoe is dropped. So we're setting up the summer nicely with what's going on there. Oh, and I'd be remiss coming off of last week's show if we don't mention Sami Zayn on that show was a king.
Man.
Yes.
My God.
Yes.
Well, we were on the whole talk last week about could they be planting seeds for something? Could they be setting up for down the road in Saudi for a crowning moment for him? Well, if they do it, that crowd's going to have a hell of a time with it because he was just as over on that show as he was in Toronto back in February. He was over huge. So if they play that out, Crab's idea from last week about Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn possibly in October, if the pieces fit for me, everything on that show made it look like it could happen. So who knows? What show am I leaving out? Battleground. Right. On Battleground, obviously, I saw a lot of people saying the Dijak and Ilya Dragunov match was like the match of the weekend. And no, Crab once again mentioned that last weekend. It might steal the weekend, and I saw a lot of people saying that. So that definitely delivered. Breaker and Carmelo was great as always. Tiffany Stratton getting the crowd. I like that they made her champ. It feels like the right time. I don't think it's too early, like Damian said. I think it's kind of sink or swim time for her to take that next step. And hey, it's developmental. Someone needs to be champ. May as well be her at this point. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. But there was a lot of good wrestling last weekend, for sure. I agree with that sentiment. So I think in the end, now the question becomes, like you said, the overall sentiment. I don't know, those 3 shows, which show won? In some ways, I think the NXT show probably bell to bell probably was the most consistent. Of course, obviously it was a shorter show, fewer matches. The Saudi show is probably the most newsworthy show. And I think I got to go with what Crab was saying earlier. As far as like the most inconsistent show out of them, I'd say it's got to be Double or Nothing. It had like a couple high points here and there, but the lows on Double or Nothing were lower than a lot of stuff on the other shows. That Jamie Hayter segment was just like, whew, that was rough. So injury or not. Celis, I don't know. of what you saw, which show you giving the nod to?
I'll give it to Night of Champions too. And let's not forget, we haven't even talked about Seth Rollins. Just having him of an opening match and having a new world title with that's on the Raw side now, the world heavyweight title. The match of him and AJ Styles was not a sleeper. It was a good match. And if you follow, Seth Rollins' early career, you've seen early stages where AJ Styles really looked out for him in doing those early matches while he was in TNA, being able to go and just seeing how the transition now, it's like a passing of the torch in a way on the very low end of how Seth has now kind of blessed. AJ has blessed Seth about how good of a wrestler he is for that. And that moment was definitely worth it. Have Triple H coming out there to give the seal of approval. And then, of course, with the title change on the Raw Women's title, it was a very solid show. I was a huge fan of Night of Champions and what took place.
All right, Damian, your thought.
Night of Champions 1, Battleground 2, Double or Nothing 3.
I agree.
All right. Giant Crab, is that you going with that breakdown like you were saying earlier? Or are you going to switch it up?
Yeah, I would, because I only watch bits and pieces of every show. I would say that it was Dragunov versus Dijak was number 1. I think the Blackjack Battle Royal was number 2, and then you had what was the thing? The Night of Champions. It was Roman versus the tag match in the end.
Yeah, the main event. Yeah, there you go. So I think the big takeaway is, like you were saying at the beginning, there was a lot of damn good stuff last weekend. So if anything helped, there was variety. There's a lot of stuff out there to check out. And, even if one show wasn't your bag, you had others to choose from. So, hey, not a bad position to be in. Lots of options out there. So, all right, I think it's halftime. We'll hit the halftime break here. We come back. I think we're going to have Indie Spotlight this week, right? We're going to have Indie Spotlight. And then we'll talk about the ladies from last weekend, because some gold was dropped, some streaks were ended. And was it the right time to do it? Was it the right place? And where do we go from here? So all that after the break. Stay with us, folks. Your Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast is back right after this.
Are you a fan of all things media? Are you a fan of professional wrestling and sports? Then you need to check out Big Gold Belt Media. We're the ultimate destination for all things entertainment and media, with the latest news, interviews, and analysis from the world of the aforementioned entertainment realm. Our team of dedicated journalists and analysts will bring you exclusive content that you're not going to find anywhere else. And we're not just an online destination. We attend live events, conventions, bringing you behind-the-scenes access and exclusive content that you're not going to find anywhere else. Plus, you can show your support for our brand by subscribing to our Patreon, patreon.com/BigGoldBelt. Join the Big Gold Belt Media community today and stay ahead of the game. Follow all our social media platforms at Big Gold Belt for the latest updates and exclusive content. Whether you're a diehard wrestling, sports, nerd culture fan, or just a casual like some people, Big Gold Belt Media has everything you're going to need to stay informed and entertained. So what are you waiting for? Check us out today at BigGoldBelt.com. That's BigGoldBelt.com.
Yes, indeed, BigGoldBelt.com. And on Thursday nights here on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast, we always like to check in with what's happening on the indies. So here's Giant Crab with the Indie Wrestling Spotlight.
Yep. So this week, I have this up. There's one company, Spark Joshi Puresaru, and they are doing 2 shows. One show is June 11th. That is in the Harbor Room at Newark, New Jersey. The other show is January 16th out there in West Covina, California at the East San Gabriel Valley Japanese Community Center. Now, the deal is that they are a pro wrestling organization that features Japanese women's professional wrestling. One of the big matches that caught my eye for the Newark show is Miyu Yamashita versus Rachel Ellering and Maki Ito versus Brittany Blake. Sounds good. And then they're going to turn it around at the end of the week, and then they're going to Miyu is going out to the West Coast to face Delilah Doom, Ram Kaicho versus Saki, Maki Ito versus Jada Zhang, Sumi Sakai, who if you don't know who she is, you don't understand how hideously important she is to spreading Japanese and Joshi pro wrestling in the U.S. Sumi Sakai is the invisible hand.
Yes.
That is pulling all of the strings, integrating Japanese women into the American scene. So you have her to thank. But she's going to be facing Kid Bandit at the show out there in the LA area in West Covina. Both of those are from Spark Joshi Pro Wrestling, and that's June 11th in Newark. Which is Sunday, and then that's Friday, June 16th in West Covina, California. That's in the LA area. Both of those shows you can find information on at sparkjoshi.com. You can get your tickets on Eventbrite, but the links are through sparkjoshi.com. So both of those shows look pretty damn interesting. The other show that I'm very interested in, and I might have to sneak down there, is June 18th. That will be a Sunday, the Sunday before Juneteenth, which is a federal holiday, the newest federal holiday. That's DPW, Deadlock Pro Wrestling. They're doing their Spring Tag Festival, and that's big because we were talking about Joshi Wrestling. The Magical Sugar Rabbits are in the tournament. It's a tag team tournament that they're doing, and Yuka Sakazaki and Mizuki, one of my favorite tag teams in the world right now. Best Bros, another favorite tag team of mine out there. Andrew Everett and Miyu Takase is another one. Jay Malachi and Jackson Drake, who I've seen on Dark. Rest in peace, Dark. They're another team in the Tag Team Festival. So that looks like a hell of a show down there in Durham, North Carolina at the Durham Armory. It's a Deadlock Pro Wrestling's Tag Team Festival 2023 in Durham, North Carolina. Tickets start at $20. You can get them at Eventbrite, but follow the links on their Twitter. Use DPW at DPW Pro or Wrestling on the Twitter machine, deadlockpro.com. And that's the Indie Spotlight for this week.
Awesome. Summertime's coming and the indies are heating up. So get to a show in your area. They're happening all over the place. So lots of good wrestling to see out there in person on the indies. All right. The one thing we didn't touch on from last weekend that was a common theme between Night of Champions and Double or Nothing is we had two ladies who'd had gold for a long time, one with an undefeated streak, one being champion for over a year, and they both lost and dropped their titles last weekend. Of course, I'm talking about Jade Cargill on Double or Nothing and Bianca Belair on Night of Champions. Jade Cargill, of course, was 60-0 with the undefeated streak since she showed up in AEW. And Bianca Belair has been champ, since, was it last WrestleMania, I think?
Yeah.
That had to be when she won the belt,
Yep.
the Raw title. So just over a year for her. And they both dropped their titles. Jade lost to Chris Statlander in her surprising return. And then Bianca Belair dropped the title to Asuka over in Saudi Arabia. So 2 title changes. And I know we touched on the Asuka one earlier. Davian was definitely calling that shot last week. And a lot of us we were kind of like, it feels like it might be the time. And that was a WrestleMania rematch. But I think that there's 2 things here. It's one, it's interesting that it happened to both of them the same weekend. They're synced up like that.
Yep.
And since they both had the same story going of like long time, champions, one of them undefeated, for both of them, I think the thing becomes now where do they go? Where do they go? And was this the right time to do it? I'll start and just quickly say, I think it was absolutely the right time. Jade especially, because I think for a while now, it's just been like, her being undefeated, I think, was hurting her more than it helped her.
Indeed.
Because it was just limiting what she could do in the ring, limiting the people she could have matches with. Because clearly there are some people they just weren't going to put her in there with. Because they just didn't want her having those matches yet, or having them having to eat a loss or whatever. So I think it opens up things for her. So it was long overdue, I think, in Jade's respect. Bianca, I think it's kind of sort of the same situation where, for me, it's just she needs some new opponents. She needs something different. She needs something to spice it up. And she's just been champion for so long, and it's just like, all right, we need something different out of her. A lot of people are saying, oh, she should turn heel. I don't know about that part. But it's time to see her in a different light, and hopefully this is going to be that. Let's go to Damian first, since he was way into that Asuka deal with Asuka getting the belt and Asuka with her new edge and all that. So I don't know. Thoughts on Bianca first, since you really want Asuka to get that win, and then let's hear about what you think about Jade's change that happened.
Okay, so I'll start with a blanket statement and saying I think the big problem with both of them is that they both got stale as champions. They were becoming very stale. A lot of people were saying that Bianca's was turning into the Rocky Maivia of the women's division, where it's like, okay, all right, enough, all right, she's smiley bay face like Raquel Rodriguez does. But I knew that they were going to pull the trigger on this eventually, but I mean, I'm actually relieved they did it overseas because I don't know how that would have tested well in the States, because Bianca's well loved, well appreciated by especially by young children and families. So I don't think we want to see 10,000 kids crying if Bianca lost to Asuka. So doing it over in Saudi Arabia, I think felt right, especially when you recently turned Asuka heel and you can't have her lose to Bianca twice after turning her back into old school Kana. And now she has this fresh take. Like you said, Will, what this does for me for Bianca, this sets up long-term, since we're talking about long-term booking, her and Rhea, they're going to cross paths now. We don't need to worry about a belt for Bianca. You said fresh opponents. That is who I think long-term, because they've always had those passing moments where they look at each other, they'll make a comment. A couple years ago, they were the last two in the Rumble. We can finally build to that match, which a lot of people call it the female version of Rock and Stone Cold. I don't think it's that, but I like the thought of them two having a long-term rivalry. So I think that's what this sets up. As far as Jade's concerned, I've told it to people before. Statlander was always supposed to be the person to dethrone her. It just so happens that Statlander's knees are like paper mache some days, and she was out twice for knee injuries. I said in the first segment, why did we bring in Taya if this was what we were going to do to her? We're going to have her lose twice clean to Jade. Like, what was the point of bringing someone that world-renowned? But like you said, Will, she needed people to work with that were, like, I don't want to say that could carry her, but people that knew what the hell they were doing. So the match would go pretty much without any kind of hiccups. But it was always supposed to be Statlander, and it just took longer than anticipated. I honestly think if she doesn't get injured, that undefeated streak ends a long time ago, maybe at 50 or 45, but not where we were then. And I think this helps out Jay because now she gets to beat up everybody and not have to worry about defending a title because she doesn't need the belt. We talked about this prior. She's a superstar with or without this title. She has a presence. She doesn't need the belt to have a presence or to be the face of AEW. And I know we use this term, the pillars, all the time, but there's like secondary pillars or foundation, as Ricky Stark said. She's one of them. She's part of the foundation of AEW. So the loss doesn't hurt her. It just helps in the long term.
All right, Celis, get in here next.
So, and you kind of hit it on the nail too. It was stale is a key word. But when it comes to Jade, I was just very worried because it's like you put yourself in the corner. It's like, what do you do? And in a way, you cannot have her go into a 15-minute match being 60-0 like that and then lose clean. You have to do it in a way because in a way, Goldberg had the same situation. How do you get this belt off him? You have to do it in a screwy way, which still makes him strong. But the next thing is how do you keep on giving Jade some credit of building where she is, even if she doesn't have the title? For Bianca, it was interesting to me because I think with her being stale, I think it's time for her to go heel. And I think it's also time for, the whole group, to go heel too. Because with Montez, I think he should become a heel, things of that nature. And I'm wondering how it's going to go on SmackDown where he goes against LA Knight or what's that going to be? Because you see LA Knight is ascending to the face territory. So are you going to have a little double switch depending on who you put in Money in the Bank? But with Bianca, I don't think she was becoming stale as a champion, but you just had repeated opponents that she was going to win. I think this was a perfect opportunity, like Damian said, do it overseas because you're not sure what that reaction will be, but it's going to be already behind itself when you bring it back to the States and see what happens. Do you have Bianca chase? Do you change your character? I think it was the right call to happen for both of these, but it was just very ironic that it happened at the same time during the same weekend with the same type of wrestlers. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but the biggest thing is if you have them lose the belt, how do you continue their story where they can still be strong in the top women wrestlers in their divisions for their respective brands as they move forward?
Giant Crab, was it the right time?
I can't speak on Bianca Belair because flat out I just don't watch. But I will say what I will say about Jade is that it's been time, and it's not Jade's fault. Let's just be clear. This isn't a matter of, and because what I'm hearing from you guys is that maybe Bianca was a little bit long with the tooth. She ran out of opponents. She just ran out of steam. It fizzled out. I think AEW, for lack of a better phrase, gave up on Jade.
Agreed.
That they didn't have much for her to do. When she tried to get things going, she had the baddie section. That was a thing. Then they kind of regressed from that. Then she went and brought in Hogan and Layla Gray. Well, Kiara Hogan left that group. Red Velvet, we haven't seen since. She turned face, and then she turned face in the Shadow Realm. So don't know what's happening with her. I hope she's okay. But it's been her and Layla Gray who's been really considered an afterthought in that whatever the remnants of that stable is. So it just didn't seem to have any direction. It really didn't seem to have anything behind it. And then, of course, when everybody else is involved in a bigger feud or an involved storyline with whatever they have going on, there's nobody left for her. Britt's busy. Jamie's busy. What's the girl? Ruby Stoho is busy. All 6 of them are busy. And then you have Willow. Well, she's a champion in Ring of Honor. Athena's doing Ring of Honor stuff. They're busy. Everybody's tied up. So who is left to play with Jade? Nyla Rose? Well, they cut Elevation, so no. Rest in peace, Elevation. So they didn't really do anything, and they kind of, to be honest with you, just supplanted Jade's run as champion with the other major women's storylines that they had going on. There was really just nothing for her. She just kind of found herself on the outside looking in, which is really unfortunate considering that even as champion, just have her defend the belt. I mean, at the very least, just have her defend the belt. She didn't show up on Dynamite for weeks at a time. And they were supposed to care that she's 60-0. It just doesn't really make sense. And other people have that same character arc going on. Max Friedman doesn't wrestle every week. He's only defended the belt 3 or 4 times. But yet his championship run definitely seems more impactful than Jade's does. And Jade's the first ever champion of that belt. So why is that? Why is there such a disconnect between her and for lack of a better word, bad championship run, where it's just like, please get the belt off of her. Let her go do something else. That belt is more, it's more of a weight on her than it is of a belt on her. It's more of a burden than it is something of prestige. Just let somebody else take it. Please take the pain away. And it doesn't have to be that way because she's 60-0 and it doesn't feel like that's important. So it's unfortunate. Yes, it was the right time for Jade to lose the belt because AEW gave up on the run. And to be honest with you, why in the blue hell did they have to wait for Statlander to be the one to take it from her when they brought in so many other people? I don't know where Deeb is, but for whatever reason, she couldn't have been champion. I don't know, why they brought in Taya for her to just do that and then seemingly turn heel, I guess, because she watches TV menacingly in the back. Sure, maybe that's the thing. And then, of course, all of the other indie talent that they have floating around in and out of there, like, musical chairs, they just did nothing with it. They just let it slide and dropped the ball and forgot about it. And it's really unfortunate when realistically, Jade could have just won 2 belts. None of the people that are the women's champion or vying for the women's champion actually need the belt anyway. If you wanted to build Jade up, Jade 2 belts was the move that they could have made last year. And then and that's how because her loss would then have been more impactful. And because, well, they did it with Goldberg. He won the U.S. championship. Now it's time for him to win the world championship. And when he lost the world championship, oh shit, that was a moment. So I'm not saying the Jadeberg 2023 movement should have happened, but I am saying is that what they wind up doing was arguably the worst thing they could have done, barring an injury. And then they give it to the Tegan Knox of AEW, and hopefully, no ill will against Kristen Statlander, but I hope that she can hold up her end of the bargain. And obviously that's what she was wanting to. Nobody wants to blow out both knees before 35, but here we are. I hope it goes well, but now the question is, will they remember Jade? And I'm not convinced the way she was rather unceremoniously parted from the belt. Where does she go from here? She has no group. She, lost a lot of steam with the belt, just being the belt. Now they have to build the belt back up, and now they have to build Jade back up. Where's the room to do that? Well, Collision luckily will be started in 2 weeks, so maybe that's a thing that they have to do there. But they got to get her dance partners. They got to start from scratch basically, and they shouldn't have to. So, yeah, unfortunately, it was long overdue. But the problem that I have is if they can do it to Jade, who built herself up from virtually nothing, then what are they going to do to the next person that they just get tired of? So I hope Statlander has a plan B, because if when plan A dries up, she will need to fall back on that.
No, it's a good point, because I mean, especially with this where they did a streak storyline, it's like if you're gonna do a streak, and especially if you're gonna add a belt to the streak on top of that, eventually it has to become, if there's another belt out there, it has to become, I've beaten everyone for this one, I'm beating everyone that's coming at me, I want the other belt. I mean, it's the elephant in the room becomes, why isn't she going for especially in a situation like this where the TBS women's title is not the AEW women's title. There's a bigger women's title there. Right. And it was just an elephant in the room that was never being addressed. Why is she beats everybody? Why ain't she ever going to call out the AEW women's champion? It was just, we don't want to do that. Yeah. Or anybody, ROH champion, anybody.
Or go to Japan or go to Mexico or something, instead of just have her do nothing for a month. So, and then of course, all the loose ends, where is Red Velvet? Where is Kiera Hogan? Where is Deeb? Where is, and will Layla Gray actually get back to wrestling? What does that look like? I know that she's paired with Mark Sterling. Will she just join the embassy or the firm or whatever the hell they call themselves now? I mean, will Jade be a varsity athlete? Why is this even a conversation when you have a person that you built up so high? Like that's ridiculous to me. But
I think that really sums it up. I think that sums it up. She's definitely, we talked about when they had their the press conference for Collision. They had her on the upfronts there for the media as the TBS women's champion, as like a face of the company. So they're holding her in this high esteem and putting her in like a mainstream position like that to be like, hey, check out this face that you've never seen anywhere else except on our show. And, she looks like a superhero and, has a totally unique, super marketable look. But then it's like, if you don't know what to do with that, it's like the shine can come off it really quickly. And that's where I think the danger they're in right now is, I hope Tony's got a plan, because the luster can come off really fast, especially with someone who doesn't have that experience at the position she's in. So, all right. Any other thoughts before we move on this deal between her and Bianca or anything?
I'm good on my end.
All right. Enough about the ladies. Enough about all that. I guess let's move to our last major topic of the night before we see if we have anything else to throw in. So, of course, we've been talking about the Collision show and the big announcement this week now. No longer a rumor. We know it's happening. Tony dropped the least biggest bombshell last night and revealed, yes, it's happening. CM Punk will return on Collision in Chicago. No more details other than that, but it's no longer speculation. We know it's happening. What was interesting to me is after it was announced, and this morning as I kind of looked to see what the response was, I found the response very split, very like almost down the middle. It seemed like anywhere I looked, it was like you had people who were like, all right, I've been waiting for him to come back. Cool. And then you got the other people who are just like, nah, this is stupid. He shouldn't be brought back. He caused too much trouble. This is going to blow up in their face again. And it seems like there's the two camps, the one or the other. Either you love it or you hate it, which in a lot of ways, I guess that kind of sums up CM Punk's career in a lot of different aspects. Either you love him or you hate him. But coming out of all this drama, that was kind of the temperature I got today, that there's a very split feeling on what this means for Collision, what this means for AEW, and whether this is good or bad or, I guess, indifferent. Compared to, I'm looking back to when he first showed up, where it was treated as like, oh my God, historic moment.
Right.
He's returning to wrestling after all these years. But this has a very different vibe coming out of that. Damian, what are you? I don't know how much of this you've seen in the last 24 hours since it just happened last night, but I guess now that we know it's real, now that we know it's happening, yay, nay, indifferent. What's your feeling on this?
That one, indifferent. And a lot of it is strictly because this saga has been played out for so long, like a bad soap opera on the WB.
Indeed.
And I was just over it. And we talked about this here in the show. If they don't bring him back, if they do bring him back, how do you bring him back? CM Punk and friends. It was just so much. And it ended, like I've said before, like a wet fart in church, just nothing. It brought no reaction from me at all. Am I going to sit home on Saturday night and watch me some CM Punk? No. I mean, I'm not the demographic for that, apparently. But it just doesn't move, to borrow the phrase, move the needle. I just don't care. And I'm not trying to sound like Crab, like, here's why I don't care. It's just been played out for so long and teased for so long, will he, won't he? The payoff doesn't even matter anymore. What I'm more interested in is what other talents are going to Collision, like we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show. Beside Thunder Rosa and Miro, who else is going to join the CM Punk and Friends bandwagon over on the Banish channel? So we'll see. That's the only intriguing thing to me. Will champions defend on both shows? Like, how are they going to play with those sets of rules for both shows? That's all. That's all I care about.
Celis, where are you? Yay, nay, or indifferent?
So I'm gonna go indifferent again. And actually, Damien, you took everything I wanted to say. Like, literally, I was gonna pull one of Krabby said, like, do I care about this? And so I mean, we got to give you your props on this because this is your thing. But like, I don't care. It's like with Punk, like Damien said, we've seen the story time and time on WWE. We've seen it in AEW. Okay, if you're showing up, cool, put on the show. If you're leaving, get the hell out. We don't need to see that anymore. It's like we're tired of it. The world doesn't revolve around CM Punk. If this was back in 2008, 2009, I may have more care in this situation for it. I mean, I'm even going back to the straight edge society. Give me that CM Punk again over anything. But now it doesn't matter to me. It's something that it's drug out, and if this is what AEW is trying to clam on, as far as holding CM Punk as being your marquee person to say, "Come watch us because CM Punk is coming," you're going to be in trouble.
So here's the problem that I have, and though I don't disagree with you all because you guys stole my bit,
gimmick infringement. Sorry.
The biggest thing is, I don't blame CM Punk for how the internet refuses to drop it.
Correct.
And that's not on him. The fact that this is still relevant is because people won't shut up about it.
Yeah. Well,
there are other interesting There are other interesting aspects of the show. Kevin Nash, he had a point. Will this become AEW Thunder? Because they barely have enough time, or actually, they barely have enough story for the amount of time they have on TV now. Right. Dynamite is usually overbooked and cramped, and Rampage feels like an afterthought, and people argue that's because of a shitty time slot. Well, this is Saturday at 8 o'clock, arguably a worse time slot, because who the hell is going to be home at Saturday at 8 o'clock during the middle of summer? Now, that notwithstanding, what is the reason for me to watch this show? And that's more of a show thing. Not just necessarily who's going to be on it. Will it look differently than Dynamite? Will Khan just run 3 shows and have Ring of Honor be behind the paywall playing by themselves? Will a Collision be onto itself? And that's what it is. Will Collision be SmackDown or will it be Thunder? That's the intrigue for me. Is there any one wrestler that's a selling point for a show? Well, other than QT Marshall, God's gift to wrestling, and Nikita Lyons, there's no one that would make me watch a show. Those are really the only two. So the fact CM Punk can't sell a show to me, that just is what it is. But I don't blame him because the internet won't shut up about it. That's not his fault. That's not on him, to sell the show to people. And because the internet won't shut up about it, Khan has to sell the show. So what is he going to sell the show as? Well, he's going to sell the show as the things that the people won't shut up about. So for those that go, oh God, here we go again, enough with CM Punk, who are you talking to? Are you talking to Khan or are you talking to Twitter? Because I think a lot of that angst is misdirected. Because it's not like it's not like Punk is going on every single, podcast. He ain't coming on our podcast talking about how he can't wait to get back. The invitation is always out there. But the bottom line is that we really haven't heard too much from him. I didn't know he could walk until last week. But here we are. But now that people are hanging, there are those that are hanging on his every word, and people are mad at them for hanging on their every word, and now they hate everything. So which is it? And again, the bigger overarching point is you can vote with your wallet and you can vote with your remote. If you do not like it, if CM Punk is that bad to you, then don't fucking watch it. It's Saturday night. If you have a Saturday night and the only thing that you're concerned about is I'm either going to do nothing or I'm going to watch this wrestling show that I'm going to hate because the guy I hate is on it, then your Saturday night was fucked from the beginning. You need a new plan. Because my Saturday doesn't hinge on what if CM Punk shows up in Chicago.
Correct.
It's not that serious. But there are questions about the show that I want to know. Is it going to be an hour or two? Because I think a 1 hour show really just doesn't work.
No.
I think you need 90 minutes to 2 hours to make it a thing. And there's another story that I want to get to very quickly, but I'll wrap my original point up with this is I think that it's important to see if you're mad, why you're mad, and understand and come to terms with why you are actually angsty about the CM Punk and Friends show, and understand that a lot of the onus really is on the fans. For good or bad, the fans are talking about it, and that's in wrestling what sells. As long as people are talking, they're going to keep shoveling into your face. So just don't look, as the Simpsons once said and wrote a song about. It has to happen that way. But real quickly, the other story that I did want to bring up is that Tony Khan did an interview with Gavin Bridge, a part of the Monaco Streaming Film Festival. And I think it was an interesting prospect that he was talking about something called FAST. And FAST is an acronym that stands for Free AdSense Television. So basically, it's like one of those streaming only channels of a particular show that you may see on like Samsung TV Plus, the Kitchen Nightmares channel, the Impact Wrestling channel, the America's Funniest Home Videos channel. Khan thinks that the FAST format could work for AEW, not necessarily giving them their own streaming platform that they would have to build from the ground up from an internet infrastructure perspective. They would just have a channel on Roku, Samsung TV, LG TV, and the like to just stream content 24/7 in the same way that the original WWE 24/7 channel was with the Crescent Moon deal before the network came about. And I think as it would be an ad-supported channel, he just wants his own cable channel to stream his other things. And Sinclair Broadcasting did that with Thriller TV, or Crunchyroll has a channel, and so on. A lot of content creators are doing that. Tastemaker is one of those, and I think he may be onto something. I'm not going to go back to watch Dynamite number 1 to Dynamite number 150 in consecutive order, but if I know that I wanted to watch something, and I'm interested in AEW, for example, I can just pop on that channel and see where they are and go, hey, Dynamite 89 from this city at this time.
Yep.
I remember that show. I watched for half an hour, and of course, which includes commercial breaks, which is what sells. It is a thing, and because it's a network, they could air live content, Ring of Honor, Collision, maybe, or whatever. The house shows that they're doing out there, which is going to be this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It could be an actual outlet for people that just want on-demand AEW content without the infrastructure of building their own network. They don't have to play with the Turners about it, but they also don't have to spend the capital and the resources to build their own network where they can just stream a channel. So I kind of like that. Obviously, we're not going to get Dynamite on there. We're not going to get a pay-per-view on there. But I do like the idea where if it's 2 a.m. and I'm up and I just got finished watching rugby and I'm not ready to go to bed yet, I can just turn on AEW streaming network on my Google TV and watch whatever the content is or not.
Those channels for me are like your perfect like background viewing. If you're working on something and you throw on one of those streaming channels where it's like, okay, there's nothing but Kitchen Nightmares on. I just need something on in the background.
The Ninja Turtles channel.
Look at it. Exactly. That's what those channels are for me. It's like that is my background viewing where it's like I want something on, but I'm not going to be devoting all my attention to it. But I'm going to look over at it, every couple minutes just to kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, I don't want to invest in the time to search for a thing like a Disney Plus, but I just want something right now, whatever it is, I'm good with. Let's just go with it. And then of course, if you want to do a live thing, you can just program it, and then the live show will be the live show. Yeah, or you can premiere a show at the time that you want to premiere it, like Ring of Honor did. They would premiere their shows on the Sinclair suite of channels, and then it would air in Baltimore and at 10 and here and there and everywhere. But I think that could quietly be something that is of interest. And then, of course, they can easily distribute it around the world because you don't have to necessarily go. You can just talk to TV makers and add it to their streaming service platform versus individual cable companies. To carry your network.
Absolutely. I mean, those things are only getting more prolific and more out there. So that's going to, to me, it seems like it'd be a pretty low cost investment because essentially you're just filling up a server with stuff you've already filmed and just making inserting commercials into it. And that's it. So it can't be that involved on like the back end, I would think.
Right. And because it's just a thing that's kind of just everywhere, everybody's seeing it at the same time. You can put it everywhere. So it could be just streaming on your PlayStation, Xbox, Switch. It would just be like the Netflix app, except it's just the Netflix movie channel that just shows movies 24/7, an exception for the live premiered programming at a particular time, Sunday at 8 or whatever it would be. I'm not mad at it, and if it were a thing that I'm not saying that I would necessarily subscribe to it, because why would I watch old stuff when new stuff premieres every Wednesday? But yeah, I'd be down for an AEW network. For lack of a better word. I think that would be kind of just like a slick way to just get more eyes on product in general and to get into more places, because you may not have cable, but you have a PlayStation. Well, download it on the PlayStation app. You may, or Xbox or whatever, PC, whatever. Just get the app.
Right. Or you bought a new TV or a Roku and it's on there because it's just part of their platform.
If you bought a 2023 Samsung, it's there.
Right. Exactly. It ain't going to hurt. It's easy distribution. Yeah, I can't see any downside to it. So I don't think that's not a bad idea, Tony. Yeah. Tony got some modern ideas here for ways to get the product out there. So, hey.
Right, because Lord knows nobody wants Ring of Honor, and I have no idea why.
Anything he could do that could get that from out behind the paywall of Honor would only help, because nobody I know have that thing.
Well, I know what the show title is going to be. Paywall of Honor.
I think we used it before when they first announced the show.
So we did.
We might have already crossed that one off the list.
Yeah, that might have happened.
Yeah. All right, folks, we made it to our hour. Another week with your Big Gold Belt Wrestling podcast every Thursday night, 8 p.m. streaming live here on YouTube, Twitch, on Twitter, you name it, on social media platforms. Dropping the next day in podcast form, and of course can always be found at Big Gold Belt on all social media platforms and biggoldbelt.com. I did not forget all the plugs this week. I made sure to get the website in there, made sure to get the social media. But every Thursday night, 8 p.m., we are here. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week to talk more wrestling and whatever the latest news is. So until then, take care, and we will talk to you later.
All I really need